So Power Apps and SharePoint are part of the Office 365 package which Microsoft is now selling. So here you can see some of the applications that are available, and we have SharePoint, and further down we can see amongst all these we have Power Apps. So to use Power Apps within SharePoint, you're better off creating your list first. So a list is essentially like a table. You'd have a table in, for example, Microsoft Access, where you'd actually create your columns, names of the columns which are going to hold your data. And in SharePoint you have the same thing, but it's called a list. So here's a list I've created. It's a simple one called course booking. It has the person's name, email, phone, name of the course, things like that. And from here you could actually go ahead and create your Power Apps application. If I come into list settings, these are the data types I've used for my column names. Single lines of text, yes, no's, date, times. I've got one here called choice because they can select from a drop down box a particular course. So if I click on course name, you can see in here, because I'm selling Spanish courses here, so I'm teaching people how to learn Spanish. So we've got various courses called Spanish Beginners, Spanish Improvers, Spanish Evening Conversation. So in a drop down box in Power Apps, they could select one of these. So for that you'd use what's called a choice data type, and then you'd enter your choices into here. So now we come back to our list. At the top here you've got some options. One of them is Power Apps, and if you select that, and then there's one here called Create an App. So if I click that, it's going to ask me for a name for the app. So I'm just going to put in just test app for now. Click Create, and Power Apps is going to go away and create an application based on that list. Now keep in mind it's only going to be a very basic application, but it's enough to get you going, and you can expand on it or even learn from it. So here's the app it's created. So this is like what you call a gallery, and a gallery is going to hold all the records. And at the top here you've got some options. The first one it's created here is like a refresh button. So that's going to refresh the data. So if you add or edit some data and you find it's not showing here, by clicking that, that's actually going to refresh that screen so that all the data is going to show. This here is two arrows. That's like a sort option. So it's created an automatic kind of sort option for you there. By clicking that, it will sort them in a particular order. And the plus symbol is for adding a record. And these arrows down the side here, if you click on one of these, that's going to take you to the record itself. So on the left hand side here, this is where you have all your objects. So your forms and your screens and things like that are going to be listed here with all the controls on each screen. So the name of this screen here is called Browse Gallery 1, or sorry, Browse Screen 1, and within it has a gallery. So if I click on that, you can see that gallery becomes highlighted here, and within it these are all the small controls. So if I clicked on rectangle, for example, you can see that gets highlighted there. Search icon, that gets highlighted. So down the side here is like a panel which lists your screens and all the objects within that screen. So we could now run this app by clicking up here. That would run it, and I could, for example, click on one. So I'll click on this top one, and then that lists all the data there. So I could actually delete this record by clicking this bin symbol, or by clicking the pencil here. It allows me to edit it. So for example, I could, let's have a look here. I could perhaps change the email address to yahoo.com, save it. And now if I went back to the list, I just refresh that, we could see then that that first record for Daniel Cook has yahoo.com now. So that app is working. If we now add a record by clicking the plus symbol, I could just put in some name here called Mary Smith. We'll select a course, Spanish evening conversation. Just put in some digits there for a number and perhaps a start date. And now save that record. So if I come back now, it's taking us back to our gallery. So if we refresh that gallery, we can now see Mary Smith. And it looks like it's in order of first name. So by clicking this button here, we can change the order, put it back the way it is. Now if I come back to my SharePoint list, we can see that new entry has been added, Mary Smith. Now on the right hand side of the screen, this is where you show the properties for your screens and forms and things like that. So if you want to look at the data source, you could click on the gallery so that it becomes highlighted. Now if you come across here to the right, you can see there's a property called data source here, and it's called course booking, which is the name of our list in SharePoint. Remember, we decided to base our PowerApps when we created it on this list, when we selected create an app. So it took this SharePoint list and it created an app from it. So here it is, course booking. Now keep in mind that if you add a new column here, for example, in your list, or you remove a column, then that doesn't automatically get reflected across into your PowerApps. What you'd have to do is you'd have to come across to the View menu, select Data Sources, and here on your data source you'd select the menu and then you'd click Refresh, and that would refresh your data source in PowerApps with all the latest changes that you've made in your SharePoint list. Another way to do it would be to refresh the screen when your form loads. So at the top here you've got various properties that are run, various events that are run as part of the form. One here is called onVisible. So as soon as the form becomes visible, something's going to happen. So you could tell it in here to refresh. What's it going to refresh? It's going to refresh our data source, which is course booking. So that's another way of grabbing the latest changes. So as soon as this screen runs, a refresh is done of our SharePoint list. So we have the latest changes. So I hope that's given you some idea of what is PowerApps in SharePoint. I've shown you how to create a little app, very simple app, by going into your SharePoint list and selecting the Create App option. So now let's have a quick look at permissions. So permissions will need to be set on the SharePoint list for users to be able to read and write data from PowerApps. So users who don't have at least contribute access to the list are not going to be able to create or edit records in the list using PowerApps. So if I came into permissions for this list, and I would need to select at least members, the members group, because users will need the equivalent of the members group if they're going to edit any content in the app. So with just read permission, all they're going to be able to do is view content. So for PowerApps to work correctly, you need to have people in the members group. So if you are using a SharePoint list as the data source for your PowerApps application, then all the users of the app are going to need at least contribute or edit permissions if they are going to create new records. So in PowerApps itself, the only permissions you're going to be setting are to share the app and specify whether the other user will be able to edit the app or not. Now these PowerApps permissions don't actually have anything to do with the data source that you're using. So I hope that's given you an idea of what is PowerApps in SharePoint. If you like this video, please click the button to like it, or why not subscribe to my channel. Or you can even download my free PowerApps for Newbies book at www.powerappsfornewbies.com.